Welcome to Envy's Donut, a podcast about everything, anything, and nothing in between. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode. Today's guest is my friend Grace. Hello, Grace. How are you?
Oh, well, thank you, Andy. Thank you for having me in your podcast today.
Oh, that's great having you. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm Grace Abell, and here I am recording this podcast right now. By trade, I am a graphic designer. By profession, title, I am creative director of my own design studio, which is called Abell Design. So I've been a designer now for 10 years. It's a lot of fun. Definitely you can see why experience pays in this industry. Yeah, I'm just operating from my little studio out of York. It's a little converted, we call it the Sweetie Shop, converted corner shop, which works really well, kind of location wise. And also it's just the right size for a couple of desks. And thankfully it's on a street actually, which has kind of got a lot of creativity happening also. There's a filmmaker who's based just up the road, and then we've got a cool coffee shop. So I think we're going to gentrify it eventually.
Is this something you always did, graphic design?
It's the only thing I only ever wanted to do, really. I was 17 when I made that decision that I was going to be a graphic designer. And at the time, I had no real design skills at all. I loved doing art and design at school. I was okay at that. I think what I find appealing about design, or what I did at the time, was this anonymity that you can have. You can hide behind your work. You don't have to put your name on it like an artist has to. At the time, you certainly weren't expected to be going on podcasts or talking about your life or what you do or why you do it like an artist seemed to always have to. But here we are today doing all of that, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a really good life so far.
Oh, that's great. So you don't like to be in the limelight then?
I try not to be. It's part of running your own business, so I accept that. If you get an invitation where someone finds you interesting enough to feature you on the podcast or in the magazine, which has happened, then you can take them up on the offer, because actually there are very few negative consequences to doing that. And I'm certainly not the most confident speaker, and, sometimes I wonder why people are interested in me, but it's always good fun and a good experience. Desiring to be famous, though, I think wanting to be a famous designer is a bit like wanting to be a well-known accountant. Like, famous designers are only famous to other designers. Nobody else in the outside world knows who they are, nor cares. And, sometimes you can become a household name if you do something really interesting, really great, but actually it's so rare and you really need to win the big clients from that. And to get the big clients, you need a sort of a degree of privilege. And I'm just here to get the job done. I want a good work-life balance. I want to make sure my family are looked after. Seeking fame and fortune as a designer might feel a bit fruitless.
Yeah, true. It seems like you are doing a lot of work by having your own business. Usually they say if you have your own business, it's like 24/7. Is that true?
Great question. So it's on your mind 24/7, and it's always attached to you 24/7. You cannot necessarily leave your business to go on to do something else like you can with an employer. Am I working 24/7? No, I work 4 days a week, 9 to 5, and that's enough for me. Because it's my business, I can control it, so I'm making as much money as I would be at working full time. But I've got a young daughter at home, and spending time with her is really important to me, and it's a privilege that I get to do that. As far as, yes, I am sort of working on things on an evening, for example, my social media, my marketing, things like that, but that's actually a pleasurable kind of work that doesn't take a lot of brain power in some instances, but it's about keeping people engaged, and it's wonderful that we can do that any time of the day if we want to.
Yeah, that's great. Have you ever had a project that you had to stay overtime, do it at home or do more than the normal 9 to 5?
Well, I started my career in a print magazine Deadlines are deadlines in the magazine world. If you miss your slot, your appointment with the printer, then it just doesn't get printed. So yes, I have seen, 2 a.m., midnight, whilst working for the magazine. I've also once or twice seen that kind of night shift in my own business. However, that's only when I've really been committed to deliver things for a client, and it's always worth it just to get the job done and make the client happy. I'm really grateful that I have control over my studio where I'm not set to particular hours. I have the keys and I can go in and work at night time if I want to. However, generally speaking, I like to have a separation between work and home. So my work stays at work, my home life stays at home, and if I do want to work, I go into the studio to get things done.
Yeah, that's great. You can separate the work from home. And do you have any hobbies?
Do I have hobbies? Good question. So the trouble with being a designer is that I basically turned my favourite hobby into my job. So that left me sort of floating around for many years with not really one particular pastime. I read a lot, but recently, over the last 3 years, I've really gotten into running. Now, I'm not a good runner. I am not athletic at all. But actually running has been fantastic for my mental health. It really helps solve problems, especially like work problems, where if I can go out on a run and think about a problem and then the solution will come to me whilst I'm running. And it just keeps me fit and healthy. I get to go outside and see what's happening in the world. I've seen some really preposterous things whilst out on runs that I would have missed out on. And while I don't enjoy it whilst I'm out, especially in the cold weather like we've got now, coming home, the feeling is just euphoric. So yeah, running, even though it's hard and not everyone gets it, that's been my thing.
Yeah, are you running all by yourself, or are you in a group?
I run by myself because then there's no one to compare me to in pace. So that works for me. I've not actually found a running group that suits me yet. I've signed up to Parkrun, but not actually attended one yet. But maybe that's around the corner.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the social bit of it, even though people say, oh, you can't have social interactions while running because you need to focus on your breathing and stuff. But
I'm not sure if mid-run I'm the best person I can be. I'm not sure if people would want to be around me whilst I'm out of breath and just trying to get around the route. But, I can run 10k quite easily. I did run a half marathon last year and I'm working towards doing another one of those. I've not really kind of got running friends yet.
How about the social aspect of your business?
Community is really important to me and has been throughout my life because you can create a kind of your own family through community. And I've realised over the past few years, especially as an adult, but I think it's been exacerbated by the pandemic and we're all living our lives online now, that we have a lot of surface level friends who we'll see in the street and say hi and are really friendly with, but for example, you couldn't go to them in a time of a crisis. So I'm really trying to build these relationships in my life. So I've been a part of the group York Creatives since it's more or less its inception, and I attend their monthly drinks events, and then I volunteer for them. I create their MailChimp newsletter as part of their team. I really enjoy doing that, and I'd like to bring that doing MailChimp into my work actually. And then also on Friday night, I hosted a crit group on behalf of York Creatives, where a lot of creatives came together to discuss their own work in kind of a private, safe space. And that was a lot of fun. And actually, we only had 3 people there, but we still managed to fill 2.5 hours. So it just shows there is an appetite for discussing work and building these relationships within our city. It's just we need to create the spaces to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great initiative to bring people together. I think that's how we met.
Yeah, we met online, didn't we?
No, I think we met at one of these social events.
Okay.
I was in town like 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember. That was great because I was so surprised at finding so many people with common interest and getting together and I felt among friends. So that
Oh,
was,
good.
even though it was like the first time for me there and I didn't know anyone.
That's
Yeah.
great to hear. So I've found with the internet, especially social media, it's all about the loves and the likes, and there's very little opportunity for conversation or discussion that's not very surface level. And there is a real appetite. People want to hear honest opinions about their work, and they want to know how they can improve it. Especially as creatives, because we always know that there is no end to our creative journey. There's no end. We can't reach perfection in our skills. You've just got to keep going. And we do need guidance for that. And once you've sort of left formal education, it's really, really difficult to receive that guidance, especially if you can't afford to pay for it. So that's why I think the Crit Group really worked well, and nobody laid into each other with harsh criticism. It was just really good to ask the right questions and things like that, and like interpret people's work. That was wonderful to see.
Yeah, it's great. I think that's the hardest thing to get, like honest feedback on your work. I remember when I was looking for my own projects, someone to give me honest feedback. And if you ask your friends, they say, "Oh, it's nice," or your family say, "Oh, it's all right," but that doesn't help me. I need you to tell me the things that are not right, so I can, try to make them better.
Yes, you're right. It's one of those things that might happen in a workplace if you're working as part of a creative team. However, I've got a feeling most creatives don't actually work as part of a creative team. They're solo practitioners running their own business, or they're hobbyists, which is perfectly fine. And you can be a fantastic hobbyist and still want to improve. And that's having what we called show and tell. We wanted to call it show and tell as opposed to like your own crucifixion on a Friday night. So that was that was really important, and I'm really looking forward to planning another one of those.
Yeah, that's great. Is that a weekly thing or a monthly thing, or?
I'm hoping to make it quarterly. It was interesting. We didn't get as many sign-ups as we hoped, but now we've like road tested it, I think I might limit the tickets to like 5 people, because there isn't a massive demand, but actually that's a good thing, because we can focus on the people who do turn up and who are present and who are willing to sort of become vulnerable and talk about their work like that.
You said you used to read a lot. Do you have a favorite book?
No, I tend to read non-fiction, and I think it's just because I've not found the fiction that I've really gotten into. I think you really need to just find the right fiction book to get you hooked in. I read a lot of history, read a lot of philosophy. I'm interested in politics and, a bit of biography as well. I'm reading Dave Grohl's book at the moment, and that's
Cool.
that's fun. He's got a few good stories, so like I think you should definitely mix up like a bit of light reading in with the kind of the more serious stuff, otherwise it can get you down a bit. I really enjoyed the short fiction of Erland Loe, though. I think he's a Norwegian. He writes these really dry, naive style short stories, which sort of like you read between the lines to really get what he's going at, and that was a lot of fun too. So I'd really like to see more work from him.
Oh, that's great. Have you had any aha moments reading a book? It doesn't have to be fiction, just, like anything that you didn't know, or you just found out and you realized, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's great, or that's awful, or something.
The one book that's inspired me the most and made me decide to want to be a graphic designer is called Pioneers of Modern Graphic Design. And it was a book my dad purchased in probably around the year 2000, so a long time ago. And my dad is interested in design, so I stole that book off him. It's just a catalogue full of really clever ideas, really smart ideas about how companies and people communicate things visually. And for me, that was a lot more engaging than art and paintings. And while those absolutely do have a place, if you can solve problems by putting pen on paper, to me, that's sort of inspired everything that I do. While we're living in an age now where there's less originality, less newness, because a lot of ideas have been tried before. There's still scope to solve new problems, and I think that's what graphic designers there. So I'm really grateful my dad got that book.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's good. Do you travel a lot?
We've just had a global pandemic, so not so much as I'd like.
In the past, maybe.
In the past. Yeah, you know what? I was really, really lucky. I grew up in a fairly big family, 4 kids. We were like comfortably middle class. I suppose my parents prioritised their spending on holidays. So they'd pack us all up in this, we called it the van, people carrier, and they would drive us all around France, Spain, Portugal, Germany for maybe 3 or 4 weeks at a time every summer. And we'd go camping, and sometimes we'd see the coast, sometimes we'd see cities. And it was only now that I'm older that I've realised what an effort they went to achieve all that for us. You know, my parents wouldn't spend money on computers or things like that, games consoles in the 90s, which were like the big thing. And I'm just really grateful because we got to see so much that other kids who would be packed off to Butlins or Lanzarote just didn't get to experience. And it was a really good time to bond as a family. And I just remember the sunny weather. Camping is really hard. I don't really desire going camping again, but the fact that they made that effort to take me and show these different places and introduce us to new foods and different ways of life, and we'd all try and learn the languages a bit, that was a real privilege. And sadly, I've not been able to do that a lot in my adult life so far, but I think I travelled more than enough as a child to make up for that.
Yeah, that's great. Would you like to do the same with your kid?
Try not to take her camping. Camping's hard work, man.
Yes,
I'd definitely like to return to some of those cities and places with her. And I actually did do a bit of backpacking with my husband before we had my daughter. So I think at one point we did 2 weeks and visited something like 6 or 7 cities within that time period. It was what's like called an American holiday of Europe, where you just hop from one plane to the next. Our route was London to Dublin to Belfast. We had a day in Belfast, and we didn't stay in Belfast. We went up to Giant's Causeway for the day. That was fun. And then we flew back from Dublin to Paris, had a few days in Paris. And then where did we go? I think we went from Paris to Venice then, and then Venice to Rome, and then Rome to Hungary, and then Hungary to Athens, and then we just flew home all the way from Athens back to London. And that was a trip that could never be replicated these days. We did that in about 2015. It wasn't a good decision financially at all. We just spent all our savings on that and had nothing left when we came home. But it was lots of fun, and we were newlyweds at the time, so it was a good bonding experience for us. And I'd love to, if I could repeat that, I would.
Oh, that's great. That sounds tiring.
We spent a lot of time in airports.
Ah, that's great. Any lessons you've learned so far?
Without sounding entirely too much of a right-wing capitalist, that you're the only one looking out for you in life. Your employer owes you absolutely nothing. Your family might not be there for you, even though mine have. You cannot rely on anyone but yourself to get what you want out of life. And I understand that we all have different, sort of opportunities and privileges, but I think the beauty and the scariness of running a business is that you want something, you have to work for it and go out and get it. And you've got to find a way, and it might be beyond what you can do. I think a lot of us, especially in this kind of world, we're wrapped up in our little sort of bubbles of what we're good at and just doing what we're good at. But in a business, you have to try the things you're bad at as well. So I've really had to get to grips with finance and, learning about that, and bookkeeping and marketing and things that I was never taught at school, things I had very little knowledge of where to begin. I'd say running a business is a rounding experience, and you learn really where your strengths lie, and that's been interesting and a lot of fun. Introduced me to so many new people who really do have their strengths and are really, really good to know as well.
Yeah, you have to do everything in your own business unless you want to pay a lot of money for others to do it.
And it's often worthwhile doing that. I outsource some things, but I try to run a lean business. There's a lot of these coaches out there who will say you can have a 6-figure business or you can take 20 grand in a month, but they don't tell you that that's not profit, that's just takings. But if you're spending 19 grand on outsourcing absolutely everything, well, that's not really worth it. So you've got to run a lean business, and I do enjoy spending money in my business. I don't have to have my studio, I don't have to have my iMac, but I think you've just got to give yourself the life that you want.
I think it helps. It definitely helps.
Yeah.
What are your plans for the future?
What are my plans for the future? That's a great question. Well, the thing is, planning, I'm not sure if it's ever worth it. I never planned to run my own business. I thought, no, that's not for me at all. But here I am, 7 years into running a business. So life has a lot of unexpected events, and that's wonderful because there can be lovely unexpected events, lovely surprises. With the business, I'd like to take it to the point where it's not just me doing everything. So I have actually recruited a second designer to help me, because whilst I absolutely love doing all aspects of design, but if I'm working on a brochure for someone, then it means I'm not using that time to bring in a bigger client with a bigger budget to do better work, when this brochure can be done perfectly well by someone else to my standards. So that's really important to me, that I really establish sort of getting into that working pattern where I'm not doing everything. So that's where I'd like to take it. And business does grow, and business always improves over time, and it's often not measurable, but it's all about baby steps. And if you just focus on the next baby step, what's going to get you one step ahead, and then it will all fall into place.
Yeah, just be careful, don't get too big, Sometimes businesses are getting crushed by their own weight.
I've got nothing to worry about there. I'm working very hard. Yeah, trying to do most things for myself and trying to build those relationships with clients.
Oh, that's great. Do you have a favorite quote?
A favorite quote? Memento mori, which means remember your death. So my mum died when I was 19. She was only 42. Now I'm 32. So if I've got 10 years left, then that's not a long time to get things done. And I'm hoping I won't die when I'm 42, but who knows? That's not in my hands. I suppose I have a tendency to take life seriously. I work hard. I have a faith, and I take that really seriously. I commit to things. I don't commit to many things, but when I do, I'm full on in there because they really guide me. So yeah, memento mori, what am I going to leave behind? Am I leaving behind a great portfolio? Am I making sure that my clients are always happy with me? Or have I annoyed someone? I suppose I don't want to die with regrets. That's been really important to me, because actually the pinnacle of our life really is sort of like our demise, our death, and we're not here forever. And, we've got to decide, are we going to leave the world in a better state than we found it? What problems are ours to fix and what aren't? It teaches us how to prioritise, I think. Yeah. And that's really important. And, these 10 years are going to go by in a flash, and I hope I get many, many more years ahead of me than that. But there's no guarantee of that.
Yeah, of course. That's great. So live the moment and live your life to the fullest. Right? Do you have a website or social media where people can find you? And
yes, so I quit Twitter a year ago. No regrets. I highly recommend leaving Twitter behind. But I have a portfolio that's at abelldesign.co.uk. That's ABELL design. And then I'm on Instagram, that's Abell_design. I don't have a public Facebook page. I'm on LinkedIn quite regularly, as LinkedIn really works well for my business. And I think that's enough of the internet, but you can Google me and I tend to be the first result where you can see other interviews I've given, pictures of me in my studio, and some of the work I've done too.
Yeah, what kind of work are you doing so people know what exactly your area of expertise is? Graphic design is a big area.
Yes, it's broad. I'm primarily a commercial graphic designer, so my work, I'd say, minimalist. It's not, everything is there for a reason. There's very little that's decorative. It's very business focused, very commercial. So it is things like I love branding the most. If I had to just draw logos the rest of my life, I'd be perfectly happy. But I design brochures. I've been doing posters. We were never taught poster design at university because they're like, nobody needs posters anymore, apart from for gigs. But some shops need posters still. It's a really broad range, but generally speaking, I work with businesses who have a really sort of classy look about them. They're well put together. They tend to not be too like fat kid friendly. I'm not into novelty fonts and things like that. Sensible businesses. So at the moment I'm working for a computer shop, I'm working for a wine bar, working for a design shop, and working for a whiskey distillery as well. Favourite clients I've had in the past, I worked with Royal Mail, I've worked with National Geographic, which was an absolute life-changing privilege that I still can't believe I got to do. So, yeah, bit of everything. I like to say I can fit in with everyone's brands. I don't think I have a personal style, but I'm told I do. I like to just make things look really professional.
How did you end up working for National Geographic? I wanted to ask you that for a long time.
Great question. I started organising little get-togethers. Going back to community, I started organising little get-togethers for creatives, designers, people like that in York at the pub. And I was in a co-working space at the time, working with a lovely other lady called Gemma, and she brought along a former colleague who had just moved to York and wanted to meet people. He was working for National Geographic Traveller in their London office at the time and commuting. And so he came along, super nice guy, Chris Hudson. He's not there anymore, but it was sort of a bit of a fluke. He advertised for someone on LinkedIn, and I immediately put my name forward saying, yes, I've got accommodation in London and I would love to help you. And thankfully, I was in the lucky position of already having experience in the publishing industry. Plus, I already had a bit of experience working in the kind of expo large conference setting as well. So I showed him the work I'd done online. It wasn't even a full portfolio, it was just a couple of photographs of work I'd contributed to. And then I didn't hear from him for a few weeks, and I knew that so many people would have been going for that role. And then I came out of a play date with my friend and my daughter, and I was just walking home, and I just checked my phone just as I left her house, and I got the email, would you like to come and work for us? It's like, yes. And that was such a moment of joy and bliss, because it was something I was never expecting. And I've admired National Geographic since almost the day I was born. My dad always had the magazines on his bookshelf. To me, they always did things correctly and did things right in many different ways. It was all really high quality. And up to that point, I'd been working as a freelancer for a lot of local York-based companies, which is, great, and what I'm still doing now. But to be told by National Geographic that you're good enough to work for us, that was such an uplifting point, and I will never tire of talking about that job. So what I actually did for them was they put on a food festival in the summer of 2019, and they wanted an extra pair of hands to deliver all the graphics for that, and that was print, that was digital. So my work was seen on the London Underground. It was seen all across the websites and in the magazines, and a lot of stuff on the ground on the day. So that was an amazing opportunity, and probably one of the best summers I've ever had in the job. And Unfortunately, these large events haven't really happened since, but it has led to other work in the events industry, which I'm really grateful for.
So would you class that as a life-changing experience?
Yes, I would. And it's funny because actually life doesn't change in an instant for anybody. But I think it helped me take myself seriously. I'm not sure if it inspired other people to take me seriously as well, because I think freelancing certainly has or used to have a reputation of being sort of for those who are unemployable. But to have that kind of accolade and to have that work on my website, and it is front and center on my website now, really helped and made me realise that it is a viable career option. Yeah, what a privilege.
Yeah, that's great. I think it gives weight to your portfolio as well, don't you think? Having clients like that.
Yeah, I think it does. I would say it's been difficult to convince people that I have all the skills that they need using that, because people have very limited imaginations. People want to see the work you've done, but they want to see the work you've done that's exactly like what they're wanting.
Yeah.
They basically want you to have already done the job for them, even though you don't know what they want from you. So
Yeah.
but it's a lot of fun, and no one's come back to me since with, we want you to do that for our festival, because there's been no festivals on. There was a lot of new things I learned through that, and certainly experienced a bit of imposter syndrome at that job, but it was so much fun.
Ah, that's great. So was that helpful in your for your business or not?
It gives me something to talk about. People are always interested because National Geographic is a really big brand, and for them to find someone in a little corner shop studio in York to work on that, I think sometimes just having a good story to tell is enough. And I know it's sort of made my dad proud, especially because he, as I said before, he's always loved it.
What do you think the future of design will be?
Great question, Andy. It's going to be interesting how the industry might change in sort of demographics. Funding has been pulled away from putting students into creative courses, which means it's only going to be for a privileged few in this country, unfortunately. At the same time, there's probably more graphic designers than the industry demands. And that's really hard because only people with certain privileges get into jobs. And, that's generally if you're male, if you're white, things like that. So I'm really scared that we're going to sort of regress in a way, because design should be an inclusive industry, and it is to a point, because you can learn a lot of things in your own time online. You just have to pay for the software and things like that. So that it's going to be interesting in that sense. I'm not massively encouraged by the current trend is that some people are making a lot of money out of selling their creative work as NFTs, and that's fine. Sell your creative work however you like. However, the environmental impact of Bitcoin mining is fairly unforgivable considering the state of the planet at the moment.
So you're not in favor of NFTs?
I think it's an exciting opportunity for creative people to sell their work for often a lot of money, and that's wonderful. I just wish we took away the mining element from Bitcoin and blockchain and that industry. And it's going to have to happen, I think, if it's going to be sustainable in any way. People always flock to wherever money can be made. That's normal. And obviously there's a lot of money in cryptocurrency at the moment. But there needs to be a better solution than mining for it, which consumes so much power. I think in any one Bitcoin transaction, it takes as much energy as one household would use in a month. That's quite selfish, really. But as far as creating work for NFTs, I think if we can make it more environmentally sustainable, then yes, go ahead, sell your work how you like. And it's really hard to, make money out of creative things anyway. And it always has been. You do need a bit of business sense as well. But so that's going to be interesting. So I'm hoping we see changes there. there's been things that have been proposed, big ideas that haven't really caught on in terms of what the future might hold. So we've had books on Kindle for 10, 15 years, haven't we?
Yeah.
No one's done an animated book cover yet.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
We were, in fact, that was an idea proposed by my university tutors. Can you design an animated book cover? We've not seen any of those yet. And I don't know if it's for budget reasons or if people don't buy a book because it's got an animated cover.
I think it's about money.
Probably about money.
Because I've asked a guy why, an illustrator, when I designed my own board game.
Yeah.
I asked him, why wouldn't you do some comics?
Yeah.
I said, it's a lot of work, it's not enough money. So he's making more money for having one illustration than doing the whole comic book.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, thankfully it's easy to self-publish, and the economics of everything are going to be, we need to sort of cut corners or at least save where we can and not spend where we can. But it's a shame that those haven't really taken off yet, because I think there's overall a greater demand on video than there ever has been before. And we can reduce video now down to sort of tiny little pieces of information. We can have these GIFs, and they're just not being applied for book covers. And, so we'll see how that goes. I'd really like to see one, but I haven't yet. And I do read enough on my phone. As far as the future of the design industry, I found it difficult to take Pantone's Colour of the Year seriously. It's just a marketing tool for them, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you think you need to go to university to be a graphic designer?
Absolutely not. What you do have to do is put the time in, and going to university buys you 3 years of getting to the point where you can actually leave and get a job and become a full-time professional designer. However, university isn't for everyone, and if you're really motivated and you actually just want to work or get a job or do something else, then that's possible. However, university teaches you critical thinking, and it teaches you how to defend your work. You have to be able to defend absolutely every design decision you make, and the university provides you with the language and the context to be able to do that. The cream always rises. It's an overcrowded industry, especially at the bottom, but there are alternative ways rather than getting into lots and lots of debt to do that. So it's not an ideal solution, but it is one option of many. Actually, regarding university, some people are just more academic than others. So I'd actually love to go and do a master's degree. I don't know what in yet, and I don't know at which university. I think it's good that we can have that kind of tuition and that guidance available to us. But as far as if you want to be a graphic designer, there are other ways to get into it. You can learn on the job, you can learn through an apprenticeship, you can just teach yourself. But there's so many different types of designers. There are some who are more illustrative, there are some who just do digital and UI, UX. There are some who are more commercial like me. Some people really care about knowing design history. We had modules on feminism and politics and things like that at university. I wrote a dissertation on graphic design in party politics, which is not something that anyone would ever volunteer to do. It's difficult to weigh up on whether you can achieve everything you want to as a graphic designer without that extra knowledge, but it's certainly been useful for me, and I really enjoyed my degree.
That's great. What do you think about freelancing websites, finding jobs on those websites? Is that a viable way to find jobs?
It is. I'd say that there's different websites and directories for different kinds of businesses, different kinds of designers. I tend to stay away from them. I've just not found one that's worked for me particularly well. I am a member of one, which is mostly for designers, creatives in the north of England. It's not brought me a lot of work though, so it's not something I invest a lot of time in. But they are out there. I think they're possibly good for people who don't have the budget, for bespoke work. I think it really depends on the context. The most important thing for me to find clients is to build relationships. So I can do that on my own terms through social media, through getting out and networking, through creating podcasts, and just through building relationships with the people I've worked with previously over time. That's been the most helpful thing, because then people really understand about what the value you bring and they see you past what your portfolio is.
Yeah, it's always putting a face on the name.
Mm-hmm.
It's helping. Because I was talking about this freelancing websites.
Yeah.
I tried them. And how do you compete with a guy from, let's say, a different country who's charging like £5 or something like that for like a big project?
You compete on quality.
Yeah, but the client don't get to see the finished product, or it's just based on offers.
I would say then with these websites such as Fiverr, just don't play that game. It can be good for some things. So I once used Fiverr because I wanted to make sure that a Google translation I found from English to Chinese was correct. And that was really good because they gave me extra context and things like that. And for the price you paid, which, yeah, £5, £10, was worth it. As for design work, I have many people come to me over the years saying, I bought something on Fiverr, I bought a logo off Fiverr, and it doesn't work for my business. And it's sort of really obvious why, because working with someone who's at least in your country, they understand the context you're working in, they understand who your competitors are, they understand what visual language appeals in your country. So there's a lot of Indian designers on Fiverr and places like that. And I know it's economically really difficult in India to stand out just because it's such a huge population. However, I've seen things that get spelled wrong, and there's a lot of aesthetics that really work well in India, like the tastes are just different from British tastes. And that's not a bad thing, but it's something you really have to be careful of if you want to appeal to a British consumer, that you actually speak to them and communicate with them better. And I can understand, yes, graphic design isn't cheap. You get what you pay for, you really do. However, it's an investment. One client came to me a year ago and he asked me for a quote for some branding and some packaging. And he came back to me saying that quote was a lot more expensive than I anticipated. But I've moved some money around. I've saved up because I really want to work with you. So we did the job. And he's running a really profitable business now. That looks great. He's got my branding over absolutely everything he does. And for him, it was well worth it. And he's really happy and he's coming back for more work. So you sometimes do have to take a bet on yourself. I follow this comedian called Jen Fulwiler. She was sort of getting started in stand-up. She decided she wanted to do a theatre tour. So she rang round all the theatres and booked them and paid for them all on her credit card, knowing if she didn't sell the tickets that she would be bankrupt. And they sold out within minutes because she took that bet on herself. And you do have to do that in whatever business you're running. You take that bet in yourself and it usually does pay off. You will find something that does pay off eventually.
How do we educate people to show them that they actually need graphic design in their businesses? Because most of the people are just thinking, oh, I'll buy this logo on the internet and it will do, or they put some random colors on their vans and it's like they look ugly. And I know because I study graphic design and I can see these. I can spot them. But for normal people, it's just the writing. So why do you have to pay for just a logo and some writing saying that, I don't know, Andy's Donuts or whatever?
Well, you're always competing against someone who has invested in design. And that's the thing. And also, a lot of people want to be graphic designers in the same way a lot of people want to decorate their own houses and choose the paint and the wallpaper. That's really understandable because they've got to live with it at the end of the day. And it's a job a lot of people want to do and maybe just didn't have the opportunity to study it. And actually, you can get started with your own graphics on Canva or Microsoft Paint or whatever, but it will only take you so far. But I think maybe starting off small and then gives you time to work out who you are and what branding actually represents you. And then once you've made a little bit of money, you can take that to a designer, branding agency who will then actually help you put all the right things in place to help you fly. And you can only sort of fly the flag for graphic design by doing it. Talking about it doesn't get you very far, but if you show someone your portfolio and they recognise what kind of quality of work you do, then you're taken more seriously. And I'm starting thinking about putting a small booklet together, a print portfolio of my work. So when I'm going networking, I can say, hi, I'm a graphic designer. Don't take my business card, take my portfolio, because there's so many graphic designers out there doing that, and people won't really understand what you do until you show them. It's a show don't tell kind of industry.
Yeah, true. Well, it was a really interesting conversation with Grace. A lot of insights, a lot of stories. Thank you for joining us, Grace. It was a pleasure having you here. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
The time flew by. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. See you next week. Bye.